Están escuchando Nuestra Gente con Linda Parra. You're listening to Nuestra Gente with Linda Parra.
With HUD-approved NRSAs are offered enhanced flexibility in undertaking economic development, housing, and public service activities with CDBG dollars. Note that this designation does not provide grantees any extra CDBG dollars, but it does provide grantees with flexibility to promote innovative programs and enhance revitalization in those areas that are selected and are designated. This hearing tonight, we are going to provide you with a summary of what a NRSA is, how a NRSA is selected, and a summary of the proposed revitalization strategy for the two NRSAs that we are offering forth to HUD to designate. So I'm going to stop and ask the members of the panel to introduce themselves before we get into the presentation. I'll start with you, Chris.
Good evening. I am Chris Plummer, a senior consultant with Corporate Facts, a Michigan-based firm that was selected to assist the city with the development of the Neighborhood Revitalization Strategy Area, or NRSA. We have previous experience in developing NRSA plans for the city of Detroit, and we're a national HUD technical assistance provider.
I think the next panelist, please.
Hi, I'm Tiffany McNair. I'm the Housing Commissioner for the City of Toledo.
Anita Vines, Commissioner of Administrative Services. I manage CDBG and ESG.
So I'm going to,
Mike, you want to introduce
Yes.
yourself?
Oh, sure. My name is Mike Baddick. I'm the Director of Real Estate for Historic South Michigan.
I think that's it, Brian.
Okay. So, Chris, I'm going to ask you to do the first 3 slides that describe what a NRSA is, what the NRSA requirements are, and to again summarize the benefits of the NRSA designation.
What is an NRSA? This is a specific HUD tool that is intended to target CDBG resources. It allows the City of Toledo to target its federal community development block grant funds, deploy them in a more flexible way over a 5-year period. It also serves to leverage other public sector dollars as well as private sector dollars in order to create a more comprehensive impact in a selected geographical area. This is not bringing any new CDBG funds, but actually just reallocate some existing resources and allowing the leverage to happen. It also assists in community revitalization by allowing the city to serve a broader range of households up to 120% area median income above the normal 80% area median income, especially in the areas of housing preservation and housing development. It also encourages job creation and retention by reducing the amount of paperwork that is available, that is necessary in order to show compliance, and the amount of CDBG funds that are needed per job. So with all of this new investment in the NRSA, whether private sector or other public dollars, it is really going to call for some services that will support these investments. And under normal circumstances, the city is capped in the amount of funds they can spend on these public services that may include like housing counseling and other social services that will, workforce development and so on, that will support the investment. So in the NRSA, the city can spend, there's no cap on how much the city can spend within reason on those support services. And then it also encourages partnerships between the public and the private sector in order to implement the activities in the NRSA. Next slide, please. Okay, great. So the NRSA does not necessarily have to be a neighborhood. It can consist of several different neighborhoods. However, whatever is the area that is carved out for the NRSA, they must have contiguous boundaries, and the areas must be primarily residential. The city selected a percent. HUD didn't define a percentage, but as long as it's over 51%, the city selected a 60% primarily residential definition. It also requires that within that geographical area, the percentage of persons who are at 80% of the area median and income and below must equal to at least 70% or more. The NRSA also requires that the city has to assess the housing, economic, conditions, what are doing essentially a SWOT analysis. What are the strengths and weaknesses of the area? What are the threats and opportunities? And use that in terms of developing activities to be carried out. The plan must identify specific achievable benchmarks during the 5-year period of the designation. So specific number of houses that need to be created or preserved, number of jobs, and so on. There's some specific numbers that need to be identified and should be achievable. The implementation plan must also create some economic opportunities out of this increase in investment activities in the neighborhood for especially low to moderate income residents in the NRSA. And then the final requirement of the NRSA is that it needs to be submitted as a part of the city's consolidated plan, or it should be an amendment to the consolidated plan. And for Toledo, you already had your consolidated plan approved, so this is an amendment to it. Next slide. Okay. So again, this is just a recap of the benefits, being able to target and leverage resources, allowing no public service cap to cover those social services that will help to support the investments, some flexibility in reporting that will facilitate an increased amount of CDBG funded activities, and the ability to provide mixed income benefits to persons in the area and not concentrate in poverty in that specific area.
This slide, public participation and stakeholder consultation is required as part of this process. We started this process actually in October of 2019. We've had numerous focus group meetings and public meetings concerning this whole concept of the NRSA and targeting of funds for the first time in the City of Toledo. We've had several public meetings on each one of the NRSA strategies. And this chronology here shows all of the dates on which we have had consultation with stakeholders as a group and individually. Documenting this consultation is also a requirement of the NRSA application process. I won't go through in detail this timeline, but this timeline is available in our NRSA application that you can access online. So I want to talk a little bit about the selection of how did we arrive at the selection of these two NRSAs. As Mr. Plummer has indicated, HUD has geographic guidelines. HUD has demographic eligibility criteria of the percent of folks that are low and moderate income, the percent of land mass that is actually residential, et cetera. And we went through several iterations of neighborhoods and arrived at these two NRSAs, Old South End as our NRSA number 1 and Englewood as our NRSA number 2. I also must say that along the way, as we evaluated different boundaries, we had several with HUD on the proposed boundaries and got their input as to whether or not these boundaries meet the demographic and the land mass test. So we arrived at these two NRSAs, both of which meets all of the NRSA criteria, both of which have a neighborhood plan and ongoing community housing and community activities. There are a myriad of existing and planned investments in both of these areas, and there are a myriad of partners that are working in both of these areas to assist us in implementation of the comprehensive revitalization strategy that we are proposing for the two areas, which are all, again, requirements of HUD. Next slide, please. I'm going to start with the first one, the Old South End. The boundaries of the Old South End, NRSA, are the Anthony Wayne Trail to the north, Coleman Street to the east, Bartley Place to the west, and Lotus Street and the Maumee River to the south side. Next slide, please. We are proposing for both NRSAs a multi-pronged strategy, and I'm just going to briefly go over the major prongs of the strategy for you. The Old South End, we're looking at completion of any update to their master plan, their participation in our leadership and organizational training through the Neighborhood Capacity Building Institute. Organizational development and planning is very critical to our NRSA strategies because we need more nonprofits operating in these areas. We need more stronger boots on the ground. We know that Historic South Initiative, our major partner in the Old South End, has done an excellent job at bringing in funds and bringing in partnerships, but we need more than that. We need a nonprofit that can eventually evolve into a community business development organization, because having that designation will enable us to exceed 15% of our public service caps to fund public service like workforce development, youth services, etc. So we're looking to work with Historic South and any other organization that is located in the Old South End to kind of evolve into a community-based development organization to help us to pump more public service dollars into that NRSA. Economic and workforce development is also a key prong of our NRSA strategies. Improvement in the infrastructure, the significant infrastructure improvement that is planned in the Old South End, which is the a $7 million project, renovating the 1 mile of Broadway Street and doing a significant streetscape along that street is a major project that we will be working with them on. Helping their small businesses along the Broadway Mile and in the Old South End to obtain financing, to expand, developing strategies to support marketing and they're generally to support the business district in the Old South End is another one of our strategies. Neighborhood improvements, we are looking at continuing to assist Old South End with demolition of unsafe structures. We will be developing rehabilitation plans for several of our community centers in the Old South End that we are assessing now and will be funding. We'll be working with the police and the Save Our City Violence Interrupter team to look at crime prevention strategies. And again, we are going to be looking to fund more public services to support workforce development and other social service type needs in the community. And of course, affordable housing. Affordable housing, we know that our housing stock is old, and we will continue to work with HSI to do housing rehab in the Old South End. We're getting ready to launch our roof repair program. We will be doing at least 100 roofs in the Old South End through the roof program. We're assisting with acquisition, rehab, and resale of housing in the Old South End that is being now championed by HSI, that is now one of our city home funds shotos. And of course, one of the things we're very interested in is assisting Old South End to identify a site in the Old South End NRSA that could potentially be used for the development of senior housing in that NRSA. So these are the 4 broad strategies that we're hoping to implement in this NRSA over the 5-year period, along with Historic South initiatives and other partners. Next slide, please. So one of the keys to the NRSA is to make sure that you have reasonable and achievable goals. And we've spent a lot of time thinking about this. We know, especially as it relates to housing preservation, we know the challenges of contractors, the supply chains. So what you see before you are goals that we think are achievable. Obviously, we hope to, we would love to expand on these goals, but what we like to do, what we like to see happen at the end of the 5-year NRSA performance period is to develop at least 35 new affordable housing units. We want to repair at least 80 owner-occupied single-family homes. We want to really comprehensively address rehabilitation of homes in a safe and healthy manner. That includes weatherization, that includes lead for at least 20 families. And we're continuing to work, if there are any low-income housing tax credit rentals in the Old South End that have reached their year 16 compliance period, we will continue to work with those homes to turn them into homeownership through our down payment and closing cost assistance program. I mentioned the repair of at least 50 roofs, and we would like to continue to assist with the acquisition and rehabilitation of vacant and abandoned properties. So these are the...
Rosalind, could I just add here as well that even though these are your performance measurements, HUD also expects you to document the outputs from other investments that are not CDBG funded within the NRSA. So if private sector entities like a LISC or other banks or so on create units or create projects within the NRSA, you are to document that and report that to HUD as leveraged investment. There's no requirement that you measure, that you make projections on those, but if as they happen, you would report those to HUD as well.
Yes, and these numbers, Chris, are really identified here with that in mind. We know, for example, that if you look at repairing single-family homes in these areas, we're not only using home dollars or CDBG dollars, we're leveraging it in many cases with lead dollars, with state dollars, with philanthropic dollars. So the goal here, these numbers, as you see here, anticipate that federal CDBG dollars, home dollars, will be leveraged with maybe tax credit dollars, bank dollars, state dollars, et cetera, to achieve these performance measures here. Next slide, please.
Roz, you do have a question in the queue. Do you want to wait till the end to answer those questions?
No, let's answer questions as we go along.
Okay. The first question is it possible to have funding available for weatherization to make these old homes more energy efficient?
Well, yes. One of our partners in the NRSA process is NeighborWorks. NeighborWorks is our only weatherization provider in the city, and they are working with us in all of these areas. So it is possible, and it is happening. As Chris said, we are going to be required to document all of the work that goes on that's funded by weatherization funds as well. So yes, to that question, and I think we can. To the person that is submitting this question, we can probably get a list from NeighborWorks of the weatherization projects that are planned or have occurred or that are ongoing in the Old South End. So the next prong of the strategy is, again, performance measures. We're looking at infrastructure, neighborhood improvements, and capacity building, and increase in economic and human capital development. I'm going to start with economic and human capital development. We hope to be able to assist at least 10 businesses in the commercial corridors along Broadway with facade improvements, business planning. Economic development has a vibrancy initiative where they're working with small businesses to prepare space as white boxes that bringing them up to code with electrical, plumbing, so that they can be prepared for any type of business that wants to go in. So we'll be working with them to create at least 7 business spaces. That's our target goal for the Old South End, and to generally support 10 businesses with financing and expansion in the Old South End. And by so doing, our goal is to create or retain at least 3 jobs in the Old South End. Neighborhood improvements, we talked about the Broadway Mile project. Our hope again is to designate a community-based development organization. We're going to be targeting demolition of at least 23 additional structures, and we hope to be able to train at least 5 neighborhood leaders. We know that now some members from the Believe Center are participating in our Capacity Building Institute, and we hope over the next 5 years we will be bringing in some other leaders from the Old South End to join that institute. Next slide, please.
You have another question in the queue.
Okay.
How are you planning on housing enough people if you are focused on single-family homes? Is that your entire zoning plan?
We're not only focused on single-family homes. I think one of the things that we are hopefully targeting is to work with the Historic South Initiative to identify a site where we can develop some new affordable housing units for seniors. So that's definitely, I know there are a couple of sites that they have in mind, and that's definitely something that we will be working on over the next 5 years, because we know that there is a gap in the city for low and moderate income housing, and we'd like to develop a multifamily housing project, particularly for seniors. If we can find a site and get a developer that is interested, that's going to be something that we will work on. I know, Mike Baddock, you're on the call tonight. If you could just talk about 1 or 2 potential sites that I know we have discussed that we could collaborate on that could potentially be developed into multifamily housing.
Sure, there is a site just after you get over the viaduct on Broadway near Seeger. There's a vacant piece of property there that's potentially a site for senior development. That area is adjacent to, or it's actually right next to the new arch. It's adjacent to the arch that Broadway Corridor Coalition was instrumental in getting put up, with the assistance, obviously, from the City of Toledo as well. So that's one of the sites. The difficulty in South Toledo is we don't have large land masses that are currently vacant and owned by 1 or 2 property owners. So we'll have to be assembling sites for that. The other options we're looking at is multifamily, smaller multi-family sites as well, so that we could take 2 or 3 or 4 lots, put those together, and not create a multi-story building, but a smaller sites that could assist with developing rental property. We realize that a good number of people may not be able to afford home ownership or don't want to be homeowners, but are in need of decent and affordable housing. And so we're working with it. We've had discussions with the city. We've had discussions with other potential funders and interested parties to develop such housing.
And you have another question. It says, why identify and designate a CBDO?
Why identify and designate a CBDO?
It's from Linda Parra.
Okay, that is because the designation of a CBDO is required by HUD to be the conduit for public service funds that exceed our 15% cap. So in other words, our 15% CDBG public service cap. So in other words, let's say we get a robust proposal from someone, an HSI, for example, for workforce training, and that puts us over our public service cap. We cannot do it if the recipient is not a community-based development organization, which is just a designation that we fortunately, at the local level, we control the designation process. And we've talked with HSI about this. We've talked with some other organizations. So our goal is to get several organizations, or at least one organization in each one of these NRSAs, to agree to meet the CBDO designation criteria so that we can designate them, and as a result, be able to plow more public service dollars into these NRSAs. Right now is a deficiency of our strategy, and that's why we have completing that designation as something that we want to accomplish so that we can be able to use that public service dollar flexibility.
President, also the CBDO allows you to invest CDBG funds in new construction of single-family housing, which is not allowed normally under the regulations. So if you're doing a new housing project, you do have the ability to add another source of funding to the financing mix for that new construction using a CBD as well.
Okay, so there are two advantages to the designation: public service dollars increases and new housing construction ability. Thank you. Any other questions about the Old South End or any questions about the NRSA?
I have another question. It says there is another organization doing this. He was in one of the BCC, so there are more agencies that can do this. I guess it's more of a statement. No other questions.
Okay, let's proceed to the second proposed NRSA, which is Englewood. This NRSA is bounded by West Mead to the west, I-75 to north, Monroe Collingwood to the east, and Dorr Street to the south. Next slide, please. The Englewood NRSA, I'm going to start with the workforce housing piece, affordable housing piece, because this is a piece that we are very excited about. We will continue our work with, of course, housing preservation, lead remediation, single family rehab. We'll be doing some roofing work. But the exciting thing about Englewood is that we are targeting Englewood for the construction of a new multifamily affordable housing project for families. We've started this work already by clearing blight and distressed structures in Englewood, the old Drix Dairy site. We did that last year. We secured a developer that is partnering with us, and we're in financing negotiations now. We hope to break ground on that building in the spring of 2023. Developing new affordable housing units is a key prong of this strategy. It will be located on North Detroit Avenue and Grand in the Englewood NRSA. Around that building, when it's constructed, and we're starting this work now because we don't want a new building and then everything around it is distressed. So around that building, our affordable housing strategy is also going to include a code compliance grant pilot where we will be looking at a couple of zones directly adjacent to the where the new multifamily building is planned. We will be working with those homeowners in those zones to bring all of their properties up to code. Another thing we're doing in terms of affordable housing, we have a couple of year 16 portfolios of low-income housing tax credit homes that can now be converted to home ownership. We're working with our partner, NeighborWorks Toledo, to provide down payment and closing cost assistance and to release any underlying debt that the city has on those homes to allow them to sell those homes that are formal rentals, to sell them and turn them into home ownership. There are over 100 homes in Englewood that are rentals that we will be working over the next 5 years to convert to home ownership. Like the Old South End, we will be investing money for roof repair, and we hope to invest and repair at least 100 roofs in the Englewood area. The other thing that we're going to be doing that's very exciting in Englewood is workforce development. We have partnered with NeighborWorks Toledo to secure a $2 million grant from the Department of Energy, and we will be working with them to locate a facility in Englewood that we will establish what is called the Toledo Healthy Homes Training Center that will train young people to be weatherization technicians, will train people to be lead technicians and lead risk assessors and to do lead work. So again, the economic and the workforce development piece is a key piece of the Englewood strategy. Like Old South Bend, we will continue with demolition of existing unsafe structures. We're funding some community space renovations at the St. Martin's de Porres Church that will provide additional community space for the neighborhood. And we're working with the community to explore some healthy food options for the neighborhood. Finally, we have several leaders from Englewood that are participating in our leadership and organizational training development through the Neighborhood Capacity Building Institute, and we're hoping that we can, again, designate a group that is working in Englewood as a community-based development organization to help us with some of this flexibility that designation results in. So this is our strategy that is proposed for the Englewood NRSA. Next slide, please. And these again are some metrics that we hope to achieve over the 5-year period in partnership with other organizations and leveraging other funding sources that are available to us. Again, metrics here for neighborhood capacity building and economic development. So I'm just going to take you through some selected or sample projects that we are doing that we have talked about, and just to give you some visuals of what these projects look like and the vision for this work that we plan to do in each one of these areas over the next 5 years. Next slide, please. This is an exciting, there's some series of exciting pictures here of the Broadway Mile. The city and state have awarded this project over $7 million. As the Broadway Corridor Coalition has also developed a streetscape plan for this infrastructure improvement. We will be working with our Department of Transportation to help plan and fund the streetscape work. And of course, we'll be working with economic development to help to fund some of the facade work along this mile here, this Broadway Mile that is being planned for the Old South End. I think it's an exciting project. I don't know, Mike, if you want to comment on it, but I look forward to helping complete this at the end as a signature project for this NRSA over the next 5 years. Next slide, please. And these are just some pictures of the streetscape vision that we hope to work with the Department of Transportation and HSI and the Broadway Corridor Coalition to fund and implement. This is a picture of a rendering of the Drix Dairy Affordable Housing Development Site. Here is going to be 60 units. It's going to have a 2,000 square foot community space on the first level that citizens will be able to use for gathering and classes, etc. And again, we hope to break ground on that project in the spring of 2023. Next slide, please. I talked about the Englewood Code Compliance Pilot. We've got $900,000 in ARPA funds that we're going to use for this to really do code compliance on homes that are directly adjacent to this planned view single multifamily housing project that we're going to be building there. Next slide, please. This slide just shows you zone 1 and 2 of the streets that we are going to be targeting. The big area here is where the housing project is going to be located. And then these streets here surrounding them, and each one of these pictures are the streets where we're going to be targeting to help to bring those properties up to code. And a very exciting piece of the Englewood NRSA is an effort to really redevelop or reposition Swain Field, which is a 8-acre shopping center that's located right in the middle of Englewood NRSA. It sits on about 8 acres. I think it's about 85,000 square feet of space. We kicked off a visioning process last week with the owners of Swain Field, with stakeholders, neighborhoods, residents, and property owners directly adjacent to Swain Field, where we are coming together to reimagine what it is that this center could be. And we're hoping that the visioning process will produce a plan for turning Swainfield into a workforce training hub and a small business, small business incubator type space in the Englewood neighborhood. It's an exciting prospect. The collaborative is going to be leading us through that exercise over the next 6 months, and we hope to have a plan that we will work with the owners and partners to execute and to really reposition that shopping center so it becomes an asset for Englewood as well as the city. Next slide, please. So we're looking at not just the shopping center itself, we're looking at the old Lucas County Jobs and Family Services building on the hill. We're looking at the U-Haul space behind Swainfield. We're looking at Boys and Girls Club, the alley and the land that they own between their facility and 75. So the goal is to, as part of this NRSA, work to reimagine this field. Owens Community College is also working along with us, and we'll be doing a feasibility study to explore the types of maybe training that can be offered here. So the goal is to really develop this site as a workforce training that will support the Englewood area and the just the Monroe Street corridor in general. Next slide, please. So as I said, we had the kickoff last week. We're going to be doing data gathering. We're going to be doing further stakeholder engagement, and the goal is to have a master plan for the Swainfield site and the surrounding properties in the next 6 months. This is just a slide of workforce training that we hope to have there. Next slide, please. Just another slide that talks about the potential that Swainfield holds for a weatherization and lead training center and construction trades. The other thing that we're going to do in Englewood is we have identified about 5 or 6 properties that are owned by the land bank. We will be working with the land bank to substantially rehabilitate those properties as a way of jump-starting the market in Englewood. Historic South Initiative has jump-started that acquisition and rehabilitation of homes in the historic Old South End. That has not occurred as robustly in Englewood, so part of this NRSA effort will be to start that process in partnership with the land bank and start to work on some of these homes. The homes in Englewood, when you compare them to Old South End, are larger, much larger. Rehabilitation costs would be much higher, so we're having to explore. In addition to CDBG and home dollars, we're exploring federal earmark dollars. We have applications in for that. We're exploring other sources of funds that we hope to get and layer on to CDBG and home to start this rehabilitation pilot in the Englewood area. Any questions so far?
We have something in the Q&A. It says the Neighborhood Capacity Building Institute is currently training different leaders, not only Tanya Duran from the Believe Center. So other organizations are participating in the Capacity Building Institute, like Linda Parra from New Estragente Community Projects, Albert Earl and Reggie from the Frederick Douglass Center, etc. That's all it says.
Yes, we have over 18 leaders and community organizations represented in our Capacity Building Institute that we launched last year, October. We're planning their graduation in November. This is the first time that the city has done this. The first cohort recruited them, and it's been an exciting journey. They have participated in 21 different modules, ranging from ward development, strategic planning, succession planning. We've brought in housing developers that talked about how a housing development is orchestrated, talks about challenges. We brought in our land use, our planning director that talked to the cohort about the land use entitlement process and the planning process. We are planning to bring in a representative of a grocery store, site location team to talk about factors that go into why a grocery store is located in the area or decides to leave an area. The Institute is designed to really give neighborhood organizations tools to successfully implement neighborhood revitalization activities in their neighborhood. We are, of course, grant writing and proposal development is also a part of the Institute. And those organizations that are participating and that will graduate will have an opportunity to apply and receive a small grant that they can implement in their respective neighborhoods. And we hope to, every year after this year, we hope to have a cohort of neighborhood organization leaders that are continuing to participate in this institute. The goal is, again, to have more boots on the ground in these neighborhoods to help us to do the work that we need to do. Because with the city, we can't do it all. And these folks know their neighborhoods, they know what the challenges are, and we're trying to give them the tools to address these challenges.
You have another question. It's from Sue Terrell. She said, what about the social resources needed to reach out to those who are not in any programs and are not aware of programs and may need help with their homes and neighborhood issues?
When you say social resources, you're talking about mental health services and those types of things. Those are also going to be part of what we try to bring in, different resource providers to work with us as we proceed with this. Remember now that the NRSA designation is a designation that specifically is designed to address housing and community development issues and give us flexibility in the use of federal CDBG dollars. But it also encourages partnerships and coordination of services to the neighborhood. And you're right, that's something that we need to make sure that we incorporate in these strategies. So how do we intend to move forward with this? We have secured budget authority from the city to hire what we call a NRSA redevelopment coordinator. That will be a senior level person, part of my management team that will work with the stakeholders in the NRSA, work with the different organizations in the NRSA to carry out these strategies. This is not going to happen in a vacuum. My vision for this is that we will have a working group consisting of community leaders, nonprofits, funders, and anyone who's interested, who's willing to work, because a plan doesn't do anything if it's not executed. So we're hoping to, shortly after we get the designation, we will convene this work group. We will have monthly meetings. We will have committees that will work on different aspects of this plan. They have to report, we'll have assignments, they'll have to come to the monthly meeting prepared to work and with results. So we're hoping to drive the implementation of each one of these strategies by working along with our nonprofit and our organizations to really have measurable benchmarks, specific actions that we're going to take every month to get this strategy done over the next 5 years. And of course, we're going to continue with our Neighborhood Capacity Building Institute to recruit leaders and citizens in each one of these neighborhoods and help to provide them with the tools to help us with this work as we proceed. Any questions?
Yes, the first one is, what about helping with renovations of community centers in the Broadway corridor? That's the first question.
So community centers in the Broadway, we currently have a consultant on board with the city that is doing a comprehensive physical needs center of 8 of our community centers. And I believe 2 of them are located in the Old South End. We have so once this comprehensive assessment is done, the city is planning to spend about $7 million to implement the recommendations of that assessment and improve these community centers that are located in these areas.
The next question is, are you inviting to the meetings all the organizations in the Old South End?
We have done that over the past. We have been working with Chris Amato and his team, the Broadway Corridor Coalition. We have done that over the months as we have developed this strategy.
Okay, we got another question. Which specific organizations do this home-based approach? That's from Sue Terrell.
I don't understand the question. Can you clarify it? So next steps, we hope to submit this plan, I would say no later than the end of October. We will be working with Chris and his team to iron out any concerns that HUD has. And we hope to secure an approval for this by the end of the year and then kick off our 5-year implementation plan. Chris, can you give us any insight on typically how long it takes from HUD to approve a plan once it's submitted. And as I said before, we have had some conversations with them as we tweak the boundaries. But typically, how long do you think it'll take to get this application through once it's submitted?
Well, with Detroit, it took about, I believe, between 2 to 3 months for them to approve it. I don't know how the holidays will impact this as well. They have to send it up to the headquarters staff for the review. So I would say probably 3 months. If I recall correctly, that's how long it took us.
Monica, where is the application, the full application and the substantial amendment? Is that available? Where is it available? Can you just tell the audience so that they can access the full application? The PowerPoint is a summary of the application. There are lots of demographic data in the application that I think is interesting, how we arrived at the boundaries. So how can people on the call access the full application?
They would just go to the City of Toledo website, Department of Housing and Community Development, and they should see it right on our page. The substantial amendment and the application for the nurses on there.
Also, if people have written comments, how can they get those written comments to us?
They would just mail them in to the City of Toledo, Department of Housing and Community Development, One Government Center, Suite 1800, Toledo, Ohio 43604, and label it Attention Substantial Amendment Nurses. To be into us by the last day for any comments would need to be to us by October 27th, Thursday, October 27th, 2022.
Well, I think you're receiving the comments and you will get back. I'm asking that you confirm the receipt of the comments. Isn't that correct? Isn't that what you need? Okay.
Yes, when we receive comments, we usually will send a response back that we received it from the particular person.
And just point out as well, Monica, we will have as an exhibit any comments we receive from the meetings as part of an exhibit of public comment.
As well as responses. If there's any questions in the comments, we will respond.
That is all for the presentation. Now, I don't know if there's someone, Chris or Mike or anyone on the panel, if you have any additional comments, and then we'll after that we'll ask Ms. Terrell to speak.
I don't have any additional comment.
The only thing that I would say is that this process that Toledo has gone through, and I've looked at a lot of NRSA plans, not all of them, but this is one of the most robust community engagement processes. You did about 16 meetings with about 400 plus persons. So this really shows community participation in this process. And I would also mention that typically HUD approves 1 or 2 of these nurses within a city. So if the question of why didn't we just, the initial 10 we started off with, why didn't we submit those? Not all of them met the criteria that HUD has, and the likelihood of HUD approving, multiple NRSAs, that's not the typical way that these are approved. So just, FYI.
Any other comments? Ms. Terrell, are you on now?
She's saying she can only type. Her other question is how many people are listening to this meeting? We have a total of 6 additional people. And then we have a question, can you mention the items amendment not mentioned in this virtual meeting? That's from Linda Parra.
What does she mean not mentioned in the items not mentioned in the virtual meeting? I think, Ms. Parra, the entire application is available online. You can access it. It's available at our website. Monica, you want to give her the web link for the entire application?
Yes, I can include it. I can send it to her.
Include it in the chat. Okay, any other questions?
Ms. Terrell said you did not have a sufficient list or summary of the amendments.
I'm not sure what she means by a sufficient list of the amendments.
An abbreviated summary.
we can get you a copy of the PowerPoint and we can get you a copy of the entire substantial amendment that we are submitting with all of the pages. That is available on our website.
Okay, I have another question. As for the swinging field engagement sessions, will a list of dates be made available?
Yes, we will do that. We're planning those dates now.
And then Sue Terrell again, I have that, but no summary from this meeting.
What we can do again is make sure all of the attendees receive a copy of the PowerPoint and the application, which is the full application that contains all of this information in detail, as well as all of the supporting information for the application for the NRSAs that we will be submitting to HUD.
Okay.
We have another question from Linda. She said, what changed in the NRSA proposal?
Rosalind, if I could try and answer here, I think there's a little bit of confusion between the NRSA proposal and the substantial amendment to the consolidated plan. It seems to me from the comment, and Linda or the other person could respond. There are two separate documents. The NRSA proposal and application is one document. In order for it to be a part of the city's program, there has to be a substantial amendment done to the city's consolidated plan for the use of CDBG funds to allocate funding to the NRSAs and so on. And I believe, and Bonita, you can check with HUD, that they may ask you to wait until they approve the NRSA application before you submit the substantial amendment. But the amendment being talked about, substantial amendment, would be how the city operationalizes the funding for the NRSA in their consolidated plan. I don't know if that clarifies.
I don't know though. Maybe we can have a separate call with Linda and Ms. Terrell. I'm not sure. I think they're asking, and I wish I understood what they were asking, but if they would allow us to have a separate conversation with them to make sure that they understand and get the information that they're looking for, I'd be happy to do that.
No other questions are in right now.
If there are no other questions, thank you for coming this evening to all of our panelists, and let's make sure that we get the applications and the amendments to Ms. Power and Ms. Terrell and liaise with them and see if we can further clarify their questions. Good night, everybody, and thank you for
coming. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye. Thank you, Mike.
Recording stopped.